Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our QuickBooks Tax Reporting workshop with Damon Watkins. Damon is the Cal Poly Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship's Director of Finance and Operations, and he has a wealth of knowledge with QuickBooks that he will be sharing with you this afternoon, focusing on tax reporting. As a reminder, some Zoom etiquette tips. Please use the raise your hand feature if you have a question that you'd like to ask throughout the workshop. Damon will be stopping periodically to see if any of the attendees have questions. Once you use the raise your hand feature, I will ask to unmute you so that you can ask your question live. If you prefer not to ask your question live, please type your question in the Q&A feature box on Zoom. I'd like to give a quick thank you to our webinar sponsor today, Maynard Cooper. All right, Damon, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our very first beginners tax reporting within QuickBooks class per se. This is our first attempt at doing it in this manner, and so we've used this hybrid system to see if we can involve or incorporate a more interactive process in doing this particular class. The good news today is we do have a smaller group, so the hope is that as we walk through this particular class, that we can have questions that relate to specific items that you might be looking for advice on. Please be aware that one thing we don't want to do is go down to the specific level of tax advice relating to your specific business. This class is really a beginner's class to really establish how you go about setting up both payroll and sales tax reporting within QuickBooks. One of the goals of this class is at the end of it for you to feel at least comfortable with the process that's involved in setting up both payroll and sales tax reporting within QuickBooks. Now, what tends to happen in these classes is as we go through them and we proceed to the very end, it opens up a lot of questions that certain businesses might have in the process that it takes to go ahead and get them set up. One thing that the SBDC is able to provide is consulting to specific businesses one-on-one to address some of these concerns. So one of the goals at the end of this particular workshop is to give you a clear idea of what it will take for you to set up and run your both payroll and sales tax liability through QuickBooks. With that said, at the end of this particular class, I will leave some time to spend some time with specific individuals that have specific questions relating to their business and or operations. I'm just going to give an overview of how I see this proceeding through today. I've broken this up into two sections to make it a little easier from an interaction standpoint. We're going to start today with doing payroll in QuickBooks. This section should take about 45 minutes to go through, depending on the interactions and the questions that are asked. At the end of this, then I will leave it open for about a 5 to 10 minute break to see if there are any additional questions, at which time we'll move on to sales tax reporting as well within QuickBooks. That section should take about another 45 minutes. And at the end of that, I will open it up again to any additional questions. Once that has taken place, I believe we should have it wrapped up by around 3 o'clock. If at that point there are specific questions relating to your business that you would like my insight or perspective on, I will open it up to the entire group. Everything that you will see today and that I speak about will be sent out in an email later on, encapsulating both sections relating to both payroll and relating to sales tax reporting. Now, as I said in the beginning, this is our first attempt at doing a hybrid system. So we have both remote individuals and we actually have individuals in the office with us here going through this process in a little bit more detail. Again, if you do have any questions, please don't be afraid to raise your hand or to ask your question within the question and answer box that is available. So before we dive into doing payroll within QuickBooks, there's a couple of things that I just want to go over in regards to QuickBooks itself, the setup, and the interaction. So first, a little bit about myself. As the lovely Olivia told you, my name is Damon Watkins. I am the Director of Finance and Operations at Cal Poly CIE. I have about 25 years worth of experience working with companies in regards to QuickBooks. I've run the financial side with companies at $1 million level, and I've worked with businesses and run financial divisions all the way up to $250 million. all within QuickBooks. So from a scalability point of view, one of the things that QuickBooks is really geared towards is the ability to scale to that level, and it can handle it. It's not ideal, but QuickBooks certainly has the ability to handle those levels of transactions that are taking place. This is really important because a lot of people perceive QuickBooks to be a stepping stone to a more traditional ERP out there. And I'd like to remind people that QuickBooks is one of the best pieces of software out there for you to be able to track your business's payrolls and sales tax liabilities associated with it. Again, along the way here, don't hesitate to put up your hand and ask any questions that you might have. It appears we have another question on the screen. In future class, if it hasn't already been covered, can you cover how to pull out overhead indirect costs in her report? Yes, I certainly could. That would probably be more in my intermediate class. This is something we can certainly add to the request as I go ahead and build up some more of these classes and as we move forward. Okay. Please keep these questions coming because they're really important to us from an interaction standpoint. So let's talk about doing payroll in QuickBooks. There are a couple of assumptions that I have at this point, if you are at this point in regards to doing QuickBooks. So you've set QuickBooks up, you've registered with the Secretary of State, you've got yourself a tax ID number, and you have your employees in the system. As I walk through this process, I do want everyone to realize that I'm probably dealing with quite a breadth of knowledge out there. So my assumption from my perspective is that you have very little knowledge regarding payroll. So I am going to take my time to walk through this process step by step by step. Again, along the way, please ask any questions that you may have by either raising your hand or posting a question in the questions and answers. With that said, let's begin. So doing payroll in QuickBooks, as with many things in life, the key to payroll in QuickBooks is taking the time and the effort to ensure that, first of all, your QuickBooks is set up correctly. The things that I just talked about in relating to registering yourself with the Secretary of State, ensuring that your tax ID numbers are set up correctly, are vital to taking that next step and entering payroll and tracking it. One point I would like to make today in regards to what we will be talking about. This particular workshop is geared more around QuickBooks Desktop than it is QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online uses a slightly different system to report, track, and accrue. Not that it's any different from QuickBooks Desktop, but QuickBooks Desktop tends to be a more manual process with the ability to customize more specifically to what your needs are. Where QuickBooks Online tends to be a more automated system where you're relying on Intuit to handle your reporting, the accruals, and also the transmission and payments of payroll taxes. So in regards to today's class, we will be more exclusively looking at QuickBooks Desktop. So please keep that in mind as we move forward. With that said, don't hesitate to ask any questions at any time regarding what is taking place. Okay, so lesson objectives today. So I want to walk through this very, very detailedly so that everyone feels very comfortable with what is taking place today. Again, the overview of this entire process with payroll is to really get you comfortable with both setting it up and using it with your employees moving forward. So lesson objectives for today is to gain an overview of your payroll within QuickBooks, to learn more about the payroll setup process, very key. Again, I say this quite a bit, and you will probably hear me say it more than once during this workshop. QuickBooks is very much a process of putting good quality information in so that you get good quality information out. That means it's vital to complete the setup process, ensure that you have all the relevant information in the system relating to your employees. So simply putting in your employee's name, tax ID, and date of birth don't sufficiently help you set up QuickBooks correctly. So take the time to really set your employees up correctly within QuickBooks because it will pay dividends for you later on in the payroll process as a whole. Other key objectives of this lesson is to set up employees with payroll information, to set up a payroll schedule, to practice writing and printing payroll checks, to learn how QuickBooks tracks your tax liability, and to practice paying payroll taxes. Okay. So throughout this process, I will talk about specific features within QuickBooks, and I will actually jump into the payroll system to give you an idea of what it actually looks like. But I'm going to walk through the actual class right now in regards to the slides that I have, just from an information standpoint. So your company file is set up within QuickBooks. You've got it all set up and ready to go. And it's day one for you to sit down with your first employee and go ahead and put them into the system. Now, the most important part of this is actually turning on the payroll feature within the company file in QuickBooks. To turn payroll on in a company file data, from the edit menu, choose the preferences and click on payroll employees in the left panel. Click the company preference tab and select no payroll, and then click on OK. This feature will then turn off payroll. In this case, we want to leave it on because we are going to be utilizing it for our employees moving forward. So I'm actually going to share my screen with you in my QuickBooks and show you exactly what this looks like. Can I share more than one screen at a time?
I don't think so. Just one.
Let's try. Let me stop sharing this for a bit. Okay. So now you should be able to see my little construction company that I have set up here, that I've run a number of different scenarios. Can you see that screen? Yes. Okay. So you can see a number of different payroll scenarios that I've run here. Don't want to pay attention to any of the dates in here. I'm simply using these as an example for proceeding forward. You can see that I've got my employees, the active employees that I currently have set up in here. So let's go in and take a look at our preferences, which was exactly what we were talking about a little earlier. This would be your preference scheme. Now from here, you've probably been in this when you were setting up your company profile. So with that said, we want to go scroll through here until we get to payroll and employees. And from this section right here, there are no personal preferences for payroll and employees. Please click on the company preferences right here. From this screen, it's going to prompt you to change the company preferences to what your needs are. So in my case right now, I am in single user mode, which means I'm the only individual that can be in here and writing to this particular file. So this is where we would set up the process of enabling payroll within QuickBooks. Okay. Take the time to go through here and make sure that you're comfortable with what is taking place in here. It seems very minor, but the process of setting up payroll in QuickBooks is key that all the relevant information relating to both your company and your employees are set up correctly. I can't tell you how many times that I've run into issues with specific individuals or businesses where they have not taken the time or the effort to ensure that these preferences are set up correctly. Okay. Again, before you even get to the point of entering your employees within QuickBooks, please make sure that you've gone ahead and gone through the process of setting this up correctly. It does not take that long, but it does take some time and effort to ensure that it is set up correctly. With that said, let's jump back into our slides. Any questions out there?
It's the other display settings.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, looks like.
Make sure I'm seeing my. There we go. Okay. So
Switch your display settings. Sorry.
Switch my display. I'm sorry. What
At the top, display settings.
Sorry. Display settings.
Swap. There we go.
Okay, back in business. Okay, so we worked. I just showed you basically how to turn on the payroll process within QuickBooks, which is again key to getting this process set up moving forward. From the edit menu, choose your payroll preferences and go ahead and activate the payroll processing system within QuickBooks. To view the payroll items list, from the employees menu, choose manage payroll items and then choose view edit payroll item list. You must have payroll turned on to have this choice. So again, going into the preference and turning on the payroll processing first is key to being able to go in here. If you actually attempt to do this without, the system is going to tell you that you have not turned on the payroll system. much like the notification that you saw pop on my screen when we initially started this process. So with that said, once you're there, you can click on Close the Payroll Item List Out. Okay, so let's talk about the actual process of setting up payroll within QuickBooks itself. There are certain key pieces of information that you're going to have to get from your new employee to go ahead and get it set up. With that said, QuickBooks has gone ahead and made it as easy as possible for you to add these specific employees into the system and add them to your payroll processing moving forward. As the slide states, we're going to go and click on to add a payroll item. So from the employee menus, you choose to manage your payroll item and then choose to view edit payroll items list. Click on the new payroll item menu button and then choose new. This will launch the easy setup and click next. Select the type of payroll item that you want to create and then click next and follow the on-screen instructions. So one of the things that QuickBooks has tried to do in this process is make it as streamlined and efficient as possible for you to quickly get your employees set up in QuickBooks and in payroll. The key aspect of this, again, is much like what we talked about when we were setting up in our preferences in the payroll. Ensure you have all relevant information relating to your employee. This includes their name, date of birth, social security number, address, and dependents. All this information should be available to you before you initiate the process of setting your employee up within QuickBooks. With that said, there are lots of instances where individuals are set up in payroll and then this additional information tends to be entered later. Let me just stop you there and say this is one of the mistakes that I find happens within QuickBooks quite often. Individuals want to get their new employees in there as quickly as possible so they can get them up and running without taking the time to ensure that all the necessary reporting information is entered correctly. Again, it is well served for you to take the time to ensure that they are set up correctly within the system, as you will only be making more additional for your work for yourself at a later date should this not be the case. With that said, once you have launched the easy setup process within QuickBooks Payroll, it will simply walk you through the process step by step to ensure that you are answering all the necessary questions to get them set up. So, setting up an employee payroll information. So one of the first things I do want to highlight about employee payroll information is this is confidential information. Please be aware that when you take this information from one of your employees, this information should be stored in a manner that keeps it confidential. So if you have them completing a new employee application form where it's a physical form, please ensure these forms are locked up and that information cannot be accessed by anyone else. Also ensure that when you are going through this process of setting them up, that you are in an environment where that information cannot be disclosed to other individuals in that area, as you are dealing with sensitive personal information relating to both social security numbers, names, address, and telephone numbers. Okay, setting up employee payroll information. To view the information stored in the employee list, click on the Employee Center on the navigation bar. So in this case, I showed you a little earlier that I had my employee section set up. I'm going to walk you through this really quickly, and then I'm going to actually go back into QuickBooks and show you exactly what it looks like. Now, again, I do apologize to some of you out there because I'm assuming at this point in time that you have very little information in regards to what it takes to set it up. Some of you might be further along in this process in regards to understanding what it takes to set up payroll. But from today's class, again, this is a beginner's class, so I'm simply assuming that you have no knowledge, and we're going to walk through the process step by step by step. Okay, so in this case, Dan T. Miller is in the list, and we click on Edit this specific employee. Click on the Address and Contact tab. Click on the Additional Info tab. Now, again, if you are looking at the screen as I'm actually doing this, you will notice that you do have the 3 tabs at the top that you can quickly click on and interact with the different sections relating to payroll. In the Change tab drop-down list, select Payroll and Compensation Info. Click on Taxes. Click on the State tab to review the state withholdings. Click OK to return to the Edit Employee window, and click on OK again to return to the Employee Center. Now, as I walked you through this slide really quickly, I'm actually going to show it to you within QuickBooks to make it a little easier for everybody to understand. Okay, so we're back in QuickBooks again, and we're taking a look at the main screen that you can see set up here. The good thing about QuickBooks is they have streamlined this process to make it as easy as possible for you to interact with your payroll center. So once I get into my payroll center from here, I can actually click on this tab at the top. Speaks to the employees that we had just talked about. And right at the very top, there is Dan T. Miller. If we click on Dan T. Miller, we can bring up the information that relates to Dan specifically. So we have Dan's first and last name. We have Dan's social. Please be aware, Dan is a completely fictitious individual. With that said, as I go through this process of setting up Dan, I have Dan's address and relevant home information in here, along with his telephone number. Now, we had talked about additional information in the slide that we had just gone through. This is that option that we were referencing at that point in time. So additional information that can be added in here are things like your date of birth, date of the last raise, and spouse's name. There are also additional options within here to reference employee IDs or numbers relating to how you track your employees. Now, if you're a small company with 1 to 10 employees, this might not pertain to you. But if you're running a larger institution that has, say, 500 plus employees where you do have employee IDs, this would be the place that you would go ahead and set them up. Now, certain companies use third-party payroll systems, even though they're using payroll within QuickBooks. And this is another area where you could reference the ID number associated with your employees. Again, the ability to customize to your needs within QuickBooks is one of the key aspects of what makes QuickBooks so versatile. You can also, if you notice at the very bottom of the screen right here, go ahead and define specific fields that you may have or want within here. Now, since I'm in the single user mode right now, it's not going to enable me to go in. But if you were in multi-user mode, you would be able to go in and define some of those specific fields relating to exactly what you would want to customize it towards. Moving down the tabs, we have the payroll info tab. This would speak to what your payroll cycles are, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, weekly. This would dictate when your payroll is set to run within QuickBooks. Again, pay close attention to your payroll schedule and ensure that you do have this set up correctly. You'll also notice on the screen that you have the ability to both set up direct deposit. And let me open the tab, which it won't. Taxes. Again, once we click on the taxes tab, it opens up the submenu, which enables you to ensure that what forms are on file, what their filing status is, what their allowances is, and if they have any extra withholdings. You're also able to set up what they are subject to from a payroll liability standpoint. So in this case, we're dealing with Medicare, Social Security, advanced income credit, and federal unemployment tax, all of which will be reflected on the pay stub that is issued to a specific employee. The other option is to dictate the state that the particular employee is reporting within. This is done on the second tab. As you can see within here, this particular employee is set up to report within the state of California. It is also configured that the allowances for 3 at the bottom here, and any miscellaneous deductions that would be listed on the W4, excuse me. It also lists the marital status of your particular employee down here. Please be aware you want to keep this as up to date as possible, as it does impact the withholdings for your employee. I.e., if an employee was to get married, they would want to come to you and have this updated and submit the necessary documentation. Conversely speaking, if they were to go through a divorce or a separation, this is where you would go back and edit that relevant information. Lastly but not leastly, we have the other tab. Within this other tab, you can specifically set up the item name relating to your specific employee. Now, the reason for this that it's really important is later on I will specifically talk about the accrual process that takes place within QuickBooks in regards to your employee and when payments are due. With that said, that's the first step in getting your employee set up. Now, Since we've gone through the first 3 tabs in payroll, the second to last one that we're going to look at is the employment info. So this has relevant information relating to when the employee was hired, the adjusted service date, and the employee's type. So as you can see right here, and again, these dates are not real, we said this individual's that joined our company on the 1st of November. His employment type is regular. And by regular, it speaks to the specific individual and how they are coded within your system from an employee perspective. So there are multiple options within this that would dictate whether he is an officer, an owner, a statutory, or just a regular employee. Again, the more information that you put in here, the more information you will be able to pull out both from a reporting and tracking perspective. Again, putting in things like job titles, positions, departments, and target bonus will enable you to more closely track and report on your specific employees. Lastly, but not leastly, we have the workers' comp tab. The workers' comp tab is used to assign a specific comp code to your employee. Now, I'm not going to go into specifics in relating to the comp code, but each employee and each category employee should have a comp code that dictates what they do. So in my case, we're dealing with a construction company. And so as such, I have 4 positions that I've established within there. In this case, my coding for this particular individual is he is a roofer. And as such, I've set up specific coding to dictate. This is really helpful for small to medium-sized companies who have multiple individuals in different divisions within the company. So as an example that you're seeing on the screen right now, I have roofer, I have a carpenter, I have a salesperson, and I have clerical, and I have an exempt. With these, I'm able to generate specific reporting relating to both payroll, production, and hour utilization. Again, the more detail that you do put into QuickBooks regarding payroll, the better your reporting ability will be moving forward. It will also improve the ability for you to generate customized reports relating to what is taking place with your company and how your employees are performing. Again, the time and effort that is taken in to put this information into the system and get it set up correctly is key to your success moving forward. With that said, I'm going to take a breath and see if anyone has any questions or comments at this point in time before we move forward. Okay, back to our slideshow.
Perfect.
Okay, so we
Switch display settings. Okay.
Where did my mouse go? Found? Ta-da. Okay. So we just took a look at Dan and basically walked through the process of what it took to get Dan set up within our system. At this point in time, we actually have Dan set up and we're ready to move forward with processing Dan's payroll through our payroll system within QuickBooks. Now, one of the points I want to make as we move on to the next slide, and let's take a look at it, is using the employee defaults to store common information. So one of the things that you'll find within QuickBooks is it's very intuitive in the process that it utilizes to input specific employees. Now, you may have noticed that the comp codes that I had used to reference the roofer, the carpenter, had been already set up before in the system. And this is because we had taken the time to set up both the chart of accounts and the items that related to these employees. So one of the processes that certainly should take place within QuickBooks before you're moving through this is to ensure that all these key areas are addressed and you have the item coding set up correctly. So this involves setting up the chart of accounts and the item list that may relate to specific employees. We do actually host a class that probably be in the new year that specifically relates to the process of setting up chart of accounts and the item listing. With that said, today's class kind of assumes that most of this has taken place already, which is why you are at the point to go ahead and set your employees up. So let's walk through using the employee defaults to store common information within QuickBooks. As the more employees that you add, you will find it's an easier system to go ahead and add these specific individuals in. So to view the employee defaults, with the Employee Center displays, choose the Change New Employee Default setting from the Manage Employee Information menu button. Select the Use Time Date to create paychecks. Check the box to include pay for the time entered using the time tracking features. So I just want to stop here and talk about the time tracking feature within QuickBooks. So one of the things you do have the ability to do within QuickBooks is specify specific individuals to both specific projects and or programs / jobs that they may be working on. Now, in my case, since I'm dealing with a construction company, it's not uncommon for a particular carpenter or installer to be working in multiple locations and possibly even multiple jobs. This is where QuickBooks' ability to track the user date and time relating to these specific jobs is key. Again, ensuring that the jobs / projects that these specific individuals are working on are set up correctly. It's very easy for the employee to then tag their time to a specific project and or job to ensure that you are both billing the customer that you're working for and ensuring that the people that are working on the job are tracking and maintaining the hours that they need to get the job completed. In addition, the deductions and the company's contribution area, click on the item name column and then choose health insurance from the drop-down list. So health insurance within QuickBooks is another subsection, and I'm not going to dig too deeply into here, but once you have it established and set up correctly, it's simply a matter of you going into the menu and choosing the specific health insurance that you have gone ahead and set up for your employees. Once again, ensure that the relevant information relating to these specific health insurance companies are set up correctly before you take this step. Otherwise, one of the issues that you will find is you will have to go back into the vendor side of things and set these up again, which will in turn delay your process in getting your employees set up. Okay, moving on from there to number 4. In the amount column, type 50 and press tab. 50 being the default code, excuse me. To view the employee's default, click on taxes, which is the icon that we clicked on earlier to look at for our specific employee when we were reviewing their payroll items. Click on the cancel to close out the tax default window. Then click on the sick vacation. Click the cancel once these are set up, go ahead and click on the cancel to close out the sick vacation default window. Now, the defaults within QuickBooks are determined by how you go ahead and set up this process from the beginning. Whether you're accruing specific time for a specific employee or are using it simply to track the hours that are relating to a specific job, the process of setting these two up are very similar. Click on the OK to close out the employee's defaults window. Once these are set up in this manner, moving forward, each employee's defaults, meaning the process that you use to set up this particular employee, will be replicated on all the employees moving forward. That enables you to customize it to the specific needs of that employee. And if you need to adjust it anyway, you have the ability to simply edit, go back in and modify it. Now, this is vital if you're setting up a number of employees at one time. It'd be different if you just had one new employee join on a Monday morning, but if you had to walk into the office and find you had 20 new employees that you need to get into the system and get them up and running, this is a very simple and streamlined process that you can utilize to go ahead and get them set up. So one of the things I'm going to just stop and talk about right now is as I walk through these slides and jump back and forth with QuickBooks, I'm going to assume that as I talk through this process, if there are no questions relating to it, I'm not going to jump back into QuickBooks as much. I'd like to advance this along to a point where I feel like you're going to start asking me questions relevant to what you're looking to get out of this. And I know at the beginning of this process right now, it's a very rudimentary stage of walking you through the process. But again, it's vital that I ensure everyone that I'm dealing with here has a knowledge base that gets us to a point where they feel comfortable with the actual process of setting it up. Okay, so let's talk about payroll schedules. One of the tabs that you noticed when I was within the payroll setup for a specific individual is the pay cycle that is used. In QuickBooks, this is referenced as a payroll schedule. This dictates whether you're paying your employees on a bi-weekly basis, monthly basis, and/or even a weekly basis. So to define a payroll schedule, from the employee menu, choose to add or edit pay schedule. So if you remember in this particular Dan's place, we actually had set him up for bi-weekly processing. Click on the payroll schedule menu button and then choose new. Type in monthly in the what do you want to name this payroll schedule. Press tab and select the monthly as the pay frequency. Press the tab and select 12/31/2007 as the pay period and date. So specifying the specific period that you want to enter these specific employees will set it up within QuickBooks to automatically prompt you on that specific scheduled date to go ahead and run payroll. So you'll come into work on one day, open up QuickBooks, and there will be a prompt waiting for you to prompt you that payroll needs to be run for that particular schedule. If everyone's comfortable with that, I'm going to jump on to the next slide. Otherwise, I can jump back into QuickBooks to make sure that everyone was comfortable with where this is taking place. Awesome. We are flying. Okay. So to define a payroll schedule, press the tab, and I'm not going to specify the specific date here as it's relevant to how you want to set the specific employee out. I just use this specific date as it is the end of the year date that I would use to close the specific period out. So in this case, I'm using the last day of the year as a date that should appear on the checks. Press the tab and choose the last day of the month from the drop-down menu. Click on OK to define the pay schedule for the employees. Paid weekly, click on the payroll schedule menu button and then choose new. Okay, so this is the set. We have basically walked through a process of adding a monthly, a bi-weekly, and this is simply the same process of adding a weekly. Now, again, you may have individuals that are working for your company. And a great example of this and why I use the construction company as the point to reference here is with a lot of construction companies, they actually pay their workers, the construction workers, on a weekly basis. But their clerical staff that may run the office may get paid on a bi-weekly basis. So you might have a situation where some employees are being paid weekly and then other employees are being paid on a bi-weekly basis. That's why it's key to ensure that each individual is set up correctly and relates to the specific schedule that they should be on. Again, this process in front of you here is to establish the weekly schedule. Again, you can customize it to a bi-weekly, semi-weekly, weekly, and monthly as you wish. Again, much like the process before, you type in weekly, you press the tab, select weekly again, specify the date, click OK, and then close out the schedule. Now, a lot of companies have more than one schedule relating to payroll. It is not ideal, but the ability to do it within QuickBooks and the ability to customize it is one of the unique features that relates to QuickBooks specifically. Okay. So let's talk about assigning employees to the payroll schedule. So we just talked about the process of setting up a payroll schedule, whether related to bi-weekly, monthly, or weekly. Now we want to assign a pay schedule to a specific employee. Again, taking the time to get these set up before you go ahead and set the employee up within QuickBooks is going to make life a lot easier for you. Again, this is where we talked about the defaults that can be set up for specific employees. So if you know that your company generally deals with construction individuals that do get paid on a weekly basis, your defaults would be weekly. Where if you know that your clerical staff and your office staff get paid on a bi-weekly basis, They would not be the default. With that said, you have the ability to go in and edit these employees very quickly and easy by going into the assign pay schedule. So from the employees menu, choose the employee center, click on the employee tab if it's not already selected, select Dan T. Miller, and then click on the edit employee. In the edit employee window, choose payroll and compensation from the change tab drop-down list. From the payroll schedule, drop down the list and select monthly. So in this case, we went ahead, and if you remember, going back into QuickBooks, again, I'm just going to stop sharing this for you and jump back into QuickBooks so I can show you exactly what it looks like. So from here, great. So we go back into Dan T. Miller, payroll information, and you'll notice right up the top here, here's that payroll schedule that we talked about. So if I was to drop it down, we talked about setting up the new. From here, we could specify exactly what kind of schedule we would want. So in this case, we're going to go set up Dan as a monthly schedule. How often do you want to pay your employee? In this case, we want to pay him monthly. What is the pay period? So this is where we specify the date, right? In which case I had chosen December 31st of 2007. And here I'm going to go in and specify the last day of the month. It's going to ask you what date should appear on the paychecks for this period. You're actually going to go in here and specify the last day of the month again, and what date should appear on what day should appear on the paychecks for this pay period. You're going to specify the last day of the month in this case, since he is being paid on a monthly basis. Now, once this is set up within the system, you also do have the ability to prevent confusion from making it inactive. So one of the things that I do want to talk about real quick while we're talking about this is the ability within QuickBooks to inactivate certain items and to delete items. Now, every time I have a class, I have to spend about 5 minutes going over this really briefly, because a lot of the time there's a bit of a misconception when it comes to making things inactive in QuickBooks and deleting items from QuickBooks. So pretty much no matter what you do within QuickBooks from an item perspective, you never want to delete anything. The problem with deleting anything within QuickBooks is you actually lose that information relevant to anything else that has taken place within QuickBooks. With that said, when you deactivate something within QuickBooks, you do not lose the data that is associated with it. And you do have the ability to go back and reactivate these specific items. Again, data is key within QuickBooks. I highly recommend that no matter what you do, that you do not go back through and delete items within QuickBooks. This will make a lot of work for you at the end of the year when you go back to reconcile your books, because information will be missing and you will have no breadcrumbs to follow them back. Again, go ahead and make these things inactive. You will be able to see the inactive items on your item list or on your chart of accounts. With that said, in this specific case, we have gone ahead and set up a monthly payroll schedule for Dan. And at this point in time, I can simply click on OK, which will push us back to the schedule that has been set up. You will now see a prompt on the screen that says your monthly payroll schedule has been set up. To assign employees to this payroll, go to the payroll compensation tab on the employee record for each employee you wish to assign and choose the payroll schedule. And there we have it. Dan has gone from being a bi-weekly employee to a monthly employee. Very simple and easy process. Okay, let's go back into our slide deck. And let me see if I can.
Good. It was good.
It was good. I tricked myself there. Okay. I was getting way too comfortable with the technology. My mistake.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's move on from this slide, and I'll pause for 1 second just to see if anyone has any questions. If not, great. Let's keep going. Okay, so oops. Okay, so in this specific example, we're going to assign a pay schedule for Elizabeth Mason from the employee list. And I'm not going to walk through this whole process again because it's very similar to what we just did with Dan, but the ability to customize it to both a weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly is what we're talking about. So in Dan's case, we had moved him from a bi-weekly to a monthly. Now in Elizabeth Mason's case, we want to move her over to a weekly basis. So again, following the same process that we had already done before, we would have to go in, ensure that the weekly schedule is set up. We would then go into the added information relating to payroll compensation from the change tab. We would drop down the list, and from the payroll schedule drop-down list, we would then select weekly. You click on OK, and repeat the steps for Greg Schneider and assign him to the weekly pay schedule. So again, this is simply walking you through the process of customizing each individual employee to what their pay schedule may be. I'm not going to go through every slide that relates to setting up the weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly because it is the same process. The key part about this that I do want to highlight is ensuring that you get the payroll schedule set up before, if possible, you go in and do this. So that the options are there for you, and it's simply a matter of the defaults showing up and you going in and setting up the pay schedule that has already been established within QuickBooks. So let's talk about adding a new employee to QuickBooks. So again, at the beginning of this, we talked about the vital part of making sure that you have all your employees' information on hand before we take the steps of physically adding a new employee to. With that said, I'm going to take some time here just to walk through that same process again to ensure that everyone is comfortable with it. So again, we're in the new employee screen. We're clicking on to add a new employee. We simply click on new employee. On the personal tab, we enter all the relevant information relating to that specific. On the address and contact tab, enter the employee data. In the change tab drop-down list, select the employee info. So from here, we can enter things relating to the hire date, in this case, November 28, 2007. In the change tab drop-down list, select payroll compensation info. In the earnings section of this window, click on the item name and column and press tab. In the hour and annual rate column for the regular pay payroll item, type 15 and then press tab. Now again, these codings relate to specific payroll schedules that you have, and conversely, the payroll type rate dictates the rate that the employee is being paid at. You can go ahead and set these up for each individual employee, or you can have group codings that will enable you to establish what's known as class coding relating to specific individuals. So if you have a group of individuals that have a fixed pay rate, this is where you can cluster them together and ensure that they all have the same pay rate. From the pay schedule drop-down list, choose weekly, click on taxes. From the filing status menu, drop down and choose married. Click on the state. And again, the state is key, people, because if you're going to be crack and collector, you need to specify where these specific individuals are working, whether it be in state or out of state. In the filing status field, choose the married, in this case, 2 incomes, and click on OK. In the additions and deductions and company contributions area, type 15 in the amount column for the health insurance and press tab. So I'm actually going to pause here and go back into, oh, do we have a question?
Here it is right here.
So I'm just going to pause for a second because we do have a question. The question is from Matt. Can you set up your company's work week globally? For example, is Monday through Sunday, and it does, yes, you can. So you can specify what your work week is relating to your employees. So traditionally, the Monday through Friday schedule is what most companies set up within the system, but you can specify a specific work week, which might involve a 7-day work week. Now, do realize that when you do this, that the setup within QuickBooks is slightly different. So in this case, when we set these employees up, we set them up under California, which has certain mandates that relate to that. Now, if you were to set someone up who, i.e. worked in a foreign country or worked outside the United States or even possibly in a different state, the process of setting those states up within QuickBooks would be part of this process. regarding your specific question about setting up the Monday through Sunday, you can specify it based on the individual and how they are set up within your system. Now, Matt, if there's any further questions relating to this, I can certainly take it offline to give you a bit more data to regards to this, because I would need a bit more context when you talk about globally. Are those individuals that are working for your company here, or are they individuals that are working for your company from another location in another country, possibly? Great question. Okay. With that said, let's just finish up right here, and then I'm actually going to jump back in and walk through what we're actually talking about here. Again, keep the questions coming, people. The more interactive, the more value I can add to this for you. When QuickBooks asks you whether you want to set up additional payroll information, click Leave As Is. Leave the Employee Center open. So let's jump back into the Employee Center so we can just see what exactly I was talking about. Stop. Oops. Okay, let's jump back into our payroll section here. Let's take a quick look at Dan again. So back into Dan, taking a look, we've got our monthly that we talked about a little earlier. We have our taxes set up for Dan that we talked about a little earlier. He's married, he has 3 allowances. We talked about the state being set up correctly. We talked about the allowances. We talked about specifically establishing the California employee training tax in this case, and any additional that may take place. So if you're doing the reporting for your individuals, this is where you would be able to do things like print W-2s, et cetera, et cetera. Now, employment information is part of what we were talking about earlier, specifying the hire date, specifying the compensation, title, job, and in turn, specifying leaves of absence or vacation time or paid leave. Conversely speaking, we also have the third tab, which is the termination tab. This tab dictates the last day for the employee, the last day of their benefits, the release date, the termination type, and the severance, if any, that are made. This gives QuickBooks the ability to track this for you on an individual employee basis. Again, taking the time to ensure that this information is entered and set up correctly will save you a lot of time later on. I keep reiterating that because one of the philosophies with QuickBooks is garbage in and garbage out. We want to make sure that we're putting quality information in here so that the reporting that you're generating is just that, quality. Lastly, but not leastly, we have the workers' comp tab. From here, we talked about specifically assigning workers' comp's code that relate to those specific individuals. In this case, we're talking about Dan, the roofer guy. So let's jump back into our slideshow as we are flying along right now. There we go. Okay. So we've really gone through the whole process of what it takes to add an employee into the system, what it takes to get them set up, and the questions that need to be asked, and the information that needs to be on hand for that to take place. So let's talk about actually running a payroll schedule and what that takes. Now, one of the great things about QuickBooks is that once you've set up a payroll schedule and you do have your employees in here, the system will prompt you when payroll is due. So it's vital that you ensure that before your first payroll cycle is run, or if you've added any additional employees into the system, that they are set up correctly before you start your scheduled payroll. With that said, let's talk about how we go ahead and run a paycheck. In the Employee Center, click on the Payroll tab. In the Pay Employee section, select the Weekly Pay Schedule. Click the Start Scheduled Payroll. So once again, we talked about setting up weekly employees, bi-weekly employees, and monthly employees. Now, we're not going to be paying monthly employees every week. We're going to be paying the weekly. So the system knows that you had scheduled a weekly payroll for this group of employees, at which point when you come into the office, the system is going to prompt you to go ahead and pay these individuals. Everyone that you have set up on a weekly schedule, will come up in front of you, at which point you will be able to review those particular individuals that will be paid for the specific week. Click in the regular pay column for Greg O. Schneider's name and enter 40. Now, these specific numbers relate to either the hours or compensation that Greg will be receiving with us. Click in the regular pay column for Michael M. Whiteside and enter 25, and then click Continue. To run a paycheck, in the employee column, click on Michael M. Wilhite. Be sure to click on the underlying link for the employee's name. Click Save and Close to return to the Review and Create Paychecks window. Click on Create Paychecks. You don't want to print those paychecks right now, so just click on Close and close the Payroll Center out. So one of the things you have the ability to do is when you're coming in and running, in this case, your weekly pay schedule, you can go ahead first thing in the morning and reference everything that needs to take place for that day. But at that exact point in time, you may not want to run specific payroll. You may want to wait until a little later in the day for whatever reason. Certain employees haven't got their hours in. You've noticed a specific employee might have input his hours incorrectly, and you want to confirm with him before you run the payroll cycle. This is your opportunity at this point in time to really go back and make sure that all these key areas have been addressed. You might be reviewing the specific weekly employee and realize that you notice a specific employee that normally shows up every week on your weekly pay schedule is no longer there. This buys you the time to then go back and review and ensure that all the individuals that should be being paid that week are both set up and being paid correctly. Viewing the paychecks. To view paychecks from the register, from the account list menu, choose Chart of Accounts. Double-click on Checking and select the paycheck transaction for Michael M. Wilhite and click on Edit Transactions. Click Save and Close on the Paycheck Checking window. Close the checking account register, but leave the Chart of Accounts open. So I'm actually going to go and show you what this looks like within QuickBooks at this point in time. So again, we're not just talking around the point, but you can actually see the physical interaction with QuickBooks. Again, if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me along the way so I may answer them. Go to my list. You can tell I've been working in online way too long. Okay, so at this point in time, see my screen? Yes, fantastic. So at this point in time, you can see that we've got our chart of accounts set up within the system. At this point, I want to direct you down to the bottom here to our payroll liabilities. So within my chart of accounts, I've set this up at the 24,000 level, which is your twos. And from here, we have all the accrual for payroll liabilities that have been established within here. As you can see, I have everything from federal withholdings to FICA, state withholdings, state disability, workers' compensation, and then any direct deposit liabilities that may be associated. You also notice that I have the employee health in the payable as well. Having the ability to go in here and click on this and actually reference what is taking place, you can actually see what we were talking about on the previous page. So as an example, we can see the paycheck number, we can see the individual, and then we can see the compensation that has taken place. Again, a great place to go back and review and see exactly what has taken place with each individual for that specific pay period. Again, do not run payroll until you are entirely sure that everything is entered and is tracking correctly. It is a whole lot of work to go back and modify a group of paychecks as opposed to just going in and identifying an issue with a specific employee. Take the time to go ahead and do this correctly, as again, the amount of time and effort it takes to go back and void a check or possibly move it to a different date period is very, very cumbersome within QuickBooks. Not that it's not undoable, but at the end of the day, taking the time and effort to ensure that they're done correctly the first time makes far less work for everybody. Bouncing back and forth. Good. Okay. So save on the close out the paycheck checking window, close the checking account register, but leave the chart of accounts open, which is exactly what we did. So printing paychecks and pay stubs. So a couple of things here. First of all, a lot of companies don't actually print their paychecks themselves anymore. A lot of companies use third-party individuals that they send this relevant information out to, that then process the information, issue the paychecks out to the employee, and the data comes back that is then either imported or entered directly into QuickBooks. There are a couple of things to take into account here. QuickBooks does have a very robust payroll system that will do a lot of this for you automatically, including the filings and accruals within the system, and then we'll simply pull the relevant information out of the system to go ahead and file it for you. Now, with the process that I'm walking you through today, this is the process that you would do this manually. So you would be entering all the relevant information, and you would actually physically be cutting the checks for your employees and or mailing them or handing them out. Please keep this in mind, because as we proceed through this and actually get into the sales track, I'm going to just talk about a lot of automated systems or add-ons that are available to QuickBooks that can help support you in this manner. So talking about printing paychecks and pay stubs. So to print a paycheck, from the file menu, choose print forms and then choose paychecks. In the first check number field, type in 301. 301 would assume that that is the next check number that should be coming up on my check register. You always want to verify that this matches up with the check register within QuickBooks, and it matches up with the check that you physically have in your hand before you go ahead and put them in the printer and proceed to print. Again, it is very easy in QuickBooks to be off by just one digit on payroll. And if you do, and you're running a large payroll, it would involve you having to go back and void all those paychecks out simply because you were off by one digit. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this happen and how much time and effort it takes to go back and do it. So don't do it once, but do it twice to ensure that the check number that you have on the paycheck screen matches the check number that you have in the check stock sitting in your printer. Make sure that there's a check mark next to all the employees' names, and then click on print. Okay. You've run payroll for your employees for the first time. Congratulations, the check numbers all match up and you're comfortable with what has taken place. You pull your check stubs off your printer, you take off your stub at the bottom to track and file away, pack your paychecks into an envelope, and you're handing them out to your employees or mailing them out. But there's a second part to payroll, which is tracking your tax liabilities. Now, as I showed you a little bit earlier within the chart of accounts, QuickBooks accrues the tax liabilities for you the moment you run payroll. So the moment you run your payroll, you actually have the ability to go back into the chart of accounts and see the payroll accrual that has taken place for that specific period. To display the payroll expenses within Quick Reports, in the chart of accounts window, select payroll expense account. From the reports menu, choose Quick Report Payroll Expenses. I'm actually going to walk you through this process right now, but I'm going to finish doing this slide and then put us back into QuickBooks just to show everyone where you can see this. I will also show you a few other quick reports within QuickBooks that will enable you to clearly see the liability that has been accrued and where you stand from a payroll expense standpoint. From the drop-down menu, choose this month. Close the quick report, and in the chart of accounts, double-click on the payroll liabilities account. Close the register, and then close the chart of accounts. So let's take a quick look at that. One of the key features that I personally have a great deal more faith in is that QuickBooks Desktop does a far superior job from a reporting perspective than QuickBooks Online ever did. The ability to customize your reports within QuickBooks desktop is vastly superior to the ability to generate these reportings within QuickBooks Online. A lot of companies who start out on QuickBooks Online but want to use their QuickBooks for both cash forecasting and just general cash flow forecasting tend to prefer the desktop because of the ability to customize specific features within the reports. With that said, we're going to take a look at the reporting center and specifically payroll. Let's see, employees and payroll. So let's take a look at the payroll detail review. So we just ran payroll and we want to take a look at what actually took place within the payroll review process. So this would enable you in a very clear snapshot period to take a look at what took place and what you have just run, giving you the total salaries that were paid out over this period of time. Now, this is really key if you are on a cash flow basis, and cash flow is key to you to understand how much money is going out the door, conversely speaking, and how much money is coming in. And this is a process that when I was running payroll and tracking both AR and AP, that I would come in, and in my case, I was paying people on both a weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly basis, that every Monday, I would run these 3 reports to ensure that I was always staying clearly on top of my cash flow. Cash flow is king for any small business, and understanding the cash that is coming into your company and the cash that is going out is almost more important than in pretty much any part of what you do other than running your business. This gives you a clear and concise what your payroll liability will be going out for that specific period of time. It also gives you an idea of specific items that you might want to relate to. So in this particular case, we have advances on earned income credit that we're tracking. We have the federal withholdings that can clearly be seen here and tracked. We also have Medicare relating to specific employees, conversely speaking, the Social Security accrual, and the federal unemployment, so on and so forth down the line, including things like Medicare, Social Security again, the withholdings for California, disability, so on and so forth. This way, you're able to clearly see all the withholdings relating to any specific employee over any specific period of time. Take the time to get comfortable with these reports, as if you are running payroll for a larger company, this is an area where you want to go back in and ensure that your balances are tying out. Okay, back into our slideshow. Okay. Paying payroll taxes. To create payroll liability report, which is the report that I just showed you how to generate, from the reports menu, choose employees and payroll, and then choose the payroll liability balances. Click the modifier report and select the display column by years across the top, and then click OK. From this point, you're able to see for the period of time that you specified exactly what the liability is associated with that particular payroll cycle. Again, understanding what's coming in and what's going out of your company from a cash flow perspective is vital. Please keep that in mind as you do this. Writing a check for payroll taxes. So the process of actually paying payroll taxes can be handled 2 ways within QuickBooks. You can choose to do it manually, whereby you are actually physically writing a check to cover the payroll liabilities, or you're utilizing Intuit's payroll system, which would automatically pull the funds out if it is running your payroll for you. This all depends on how you have gone ahead and set up payroll within QuickBooks. Please keep in mind that there are a number of third-party apps that are add-ons to QuickBooks that you're able to install that handle a lot of these processes. With that said, having the ability to run it manually for yourself is key, because there are times where you do need to cut a check in the middle of a week or possibly into hours for a specific employee. Examples of these would be in the termination of an employee. As at the point of termination, you do need to, before you ask your employee to leave the building, you need to cut them a check for the time that they have worked, even if it is not a full period, i.e. a full week, a full 2-week period, or even a full month. Please keep that in mind, because this is vital to be able to track and accrue it correctly within the system. Please also note that if you do terminate an employee, you do have to compensate them. Otherwise, this is a liability that falls on you. To pay payroll liabilities, from the employee menu, choose taxes and liabilities, and then click on custom liability payments. And again, the specified dates that I'm using here are relating to month-end dates. So in the from field type 11/30/2007, and then type 12/15/2007. This is the range by which the system will then review. Click on OK. Click in the column to the left of the federal withholding payroll item. Click in the column to the left of the medical company payroll item. Again, these are prompting you for specific fields that you will be looking to enter in. Click in the column to the left of the Social Security company payroll item. Make sure to review the liability check to enter expenses, penalties is selected, and then click Create. In the memo field form, type in your EIN, i.e. Form 941. Click Save and close the record check. Close to record the check. Click Yes if QuickBooks asks you if you wish to save the changes made to this specific transaction. Close the payroll center. So much like you enter a bill into your vendors in the system and you have a due date that it's due on, the system from a payroll tax liability standpoint has the ability to track and accrue for that period of time and then specify when you want that payment to go out. Please keep in mind that this is a manual process that is used for this specific payroll cycle that we're talking about. A lot of the time, companies do use the automated system that Intuit does offer, but it's important to know how to run payroll and in turn, how to review and pay your payroll liabilities. With that said, we have come to the end of the first section relating to payroll. I do see that we have a question.
To the chat.
Let's go to chat. What is the protocol if the employee being terminated is a remote worker and is not present to be handled the final check? Okay, this is a great question. Because this is something I actually encountered quite a bit when I was working for a construction company. So the process is this: you need to have the employee's check in hand before you terminate them. So an example I would give you is I used to work for a very large solar company here in California, but they had locations in 13 different states. And one of the biggest states that we worked in was Hawaii. And as such, we would have a lot of contractors and employees out there. Now, if we were looking to terminate an individual that was on one of the islands in Hawaii, we would actually have to cut the check on our end here, have it overnighted out to the manager at that specific location where the construction was taking place. The check needed to be in hand before you were able to terminate the employee, thus ensuring that the employee upon termination had a check in hand. Now, my rule of thumb in regards to that when we're dealing with someone that is remote was that we would give them the benefit of an additional 8-hour day. And why do I say that? Well, if I was looking to terminate an individual on a Tuesday morning and I cut my check on Monday and overnighted it out to Hawaii to get it to them on Tuesday to go and speak to this individual and terminate them, there is a possibility, and it's a slight possibility, the check would not have arrived by Tuesday. So in lieu of, we would always compensate our employees for an additional day. Now, this is not ideal for some companies. We were a larger construction company and it's something that we were able to do. But again, it's important that if you are terminating an employee, that you are able to pay them at that point in time. It is a requirement of California that if you do have employees and you are terminating them, that you have to compensate them at that point in time. I'm hoping that that answers your question. If there's anything additional relating to this, don't hesitate to either put a question in, or at the end of this, we can go over it in a little bit more detail. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to take a 2-minute break here to set up the next slideshow, which will be sales tax tracking. In the meantime, if there are any additional questions, please let me know. It's now 2:15, so in about 3 minutes, we'll start this back up again, and we'll look at sales tax tracking. I'm guessing that I probably am going to have more questions relating to this side of things than pretty much any other section that I tend to go over. So please bear with me while I go ahead and get that all set up. Oops, got questions? Okay. Let's jump back in. Where am I? Okay. Okay, everybody, we're back. We had one of our individuals is actually physically here, step out the room to go to the restroom, which is why I was trying to afford her a little time. With that said, I did have another question that popped up that I do want to just share a little bit of detail or insight into. One of the questions that arose was regards to a specific individual not being present at the time of termination. So let me just be clear about why this rule is really, really particular. And I've encountered this a few times, and it can create issues for especially small businesses that don't have a traditional HR. If you're terminating an employee, at that point of termination, you need to be able to compensate them for the hours that they worked in that pay period. A lot of the time, what tends to happen with smaller businesses, they are not aware of the fact that you do have to compensate that employee at the point of termination. So an example would be an employee comes in on a Tuesday, they get terminated, you tell the employee to leave the building, and then please come back on Friday to receive their paycheck. That's not acceptable. Here's what happens. That employee walks out of the building. They then walk down to the Fair Business Bureau or one of the other employment agencies, and they file a complaint against your company. You then get a letter in the mail stating that you have not conformed to California law requirements relating to employee compensation. At which point in time is you are liable for that period of time that you did not compensate them. And in fact, they can go back and claim penalties both for you and the employee in regards to that. So please be clear that it's really important when it comes to termination of employees that you are able to compensate them at that point in time. Please be aware that you do not want to have a scenario where you terminate an employee, ask them to leave, and come back at a later date. You're creating a liability for yourself. Okay, onto one of my favorite parts of QuickBooks, tracking and paying sales tax. So a little bit of an intimidation goes along with the process by which paying taxes in general kind of has this whole aura around it when it relates to taxes in general. Here's the thing I will tell you about QuickBooks. It does a really, really good job of tracking sales tax. The key to it, though, is ensuring that things are set up correctly within QuickBooks before you proceed to enter things like your vendors and your customers invoicing and billing. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? So payroll liability and sales tax reporting you are responsible for those key areas. So ensuring that you have the counties and the states they're actually working in and invoicing to set up correctly is vital. Much like we talked about taking the time and the effort with your employees to get them set up correctly, it's almost more important with sales tax to ensure that you have all the relevant counties that you are working within, shipping in, or receiving products from set up correctly within the system so that it can accrue correctly. If this is set up correctly, it is a very easy process within QuickBooks to go ahead and do your sales tax reporting within the BOE. I reference the BOE because in my case, and another example I will give you, is I worked for a rather large construction company that did solar power. We had locations in 13 different states. And so my sales tax was accruing for 13 different states at any one time. At the end of each quarter, in fact, in my case, each month, I was going in and doing my filings by the 10th of the next month. Because I had all my states and counties set up correctly, I was able to simply run one very easy report out of QuickBooks that would give me the breakout that I needed to then go ahead and enter those sales tax reporting within the BOE. Again, taking the time to ensure that they are set up correctly is key. With that said, let me give you an area that people tend to fall into an issue with, which is setting the tax rates up for each county. So tax rates are broken down into three key areas when we talk about them. There's city, there's county, and state. These three comprise of the total sales tax liability that you are accruing for within QuickBooks. That's why it's vitally important that you have these set up correctly and set up with the correct rates. As we walk through this, I'm going to show you exactly where those are set up and how you can go about updating. One key point that I want to make when it relates to tracking and paying sales tax is that ignorance is no excuse. What do I mean by that? Well, tax rates change. In fact, they change constantly, depending on as what's about to take place with new elections. You may have an increase and a decrease in sales tax rates relating to the specific city, county, or even state that you live in. Now, one of the things that I advise people to do is go to the BOE and go ahead and set yourself up for the alerts that you can get from the BOE. The reason for this is that if a rate on a specific county, city, or state changes, you will actually get a notification. This notification will prompt you then to go into your item listing. Again, I'm going to show you this in a little bit, and update this relevant sales tax rate. So what's an example of this? Well, let's say we were looking at San Mateo's County, who has a traditional sales tax rate of 7.5%. But they passed a specific ordinance that raised that sales tax to 8%. Well, it is your responsibility to go into the system and update it to the 8% so that you are accruing and tracking it correctly within your sales tax liability itself. Again, I can't specify how important this is. Now, one of the red flags that I would use for myself is anytime we came across a new job or a new project that we might be working in a new county or state, I would take the time to do the research and make sure that I had this set up correctly. Again, much like with the payroll that we talked about earlier, there are a number of third-party applications out there that do a great job in tracking this. And I've worked with a number of them out there that I can highly recommend. And as we walk through this process right now, I will actually share some of them with you. Okay, tracking and paying sales tax. I can find that now, so I'll move to the next slide. Okay, lessons and objectives. To get an overview of sales tax in QuickBooks, the steps involved in tracking, collecting, and paying it. To see how to set up QuickBooks to track sales tax and to see how to apply sales tax to a sale. To learn how to determine the business sales tax liability and to write a QuickBooks checks to the appropriate tax agency for sales tax liability. So the whole process that I'm going to walk you through here is really going to relate to California. Each state has its own tax reporting agency that you will be dealing with. But for today's purposes, I will be referencing the BOE, which is the state of California's tax reporting entity. Please be aware of that as we move through it, because there are a number of different entities out there, again, that vary by the state that you're operating in and the state that you're doing business in. Overview of sales tax in QuickBooks. To use QuickBooks to track and pay your sales tax, you need to set up a tax rate and an agency. So in this case, the tax rate is what I was talking about when we're setting up the specified counties and the tax rates associated with the county. Now you can reference and look at what these current tax rates are at the BOE. Again, taking the time to ensure that you have the correct tax rate set up and the correct tax rates entered in your item list is key to accruing it correctly. In this case, we're also referencing the agency, which for us would be the BOE in California. Okay, indicate who and what is getting taxed. So remember that when we talk about taxes in this specific case, we're talking about sales tax, which means the invoices that we are sending out to our customers that are in turn paying us. Apply tax to each sale, find out what you owe, and then pay the relevant tax agency. So we're going to walk through all these steps so that hopefully by the end of this, you feel comfortable with the process that it takes to get it set up, process that it takes to accrue it, and the process that it takes to pay it. I will highlight, much like what I said at the beginning of the payroll, this is a beginner's class to sales tax. I am not going to go deep into what it takes from a detailed perspective, and there's specific reasons for that. But again, we should have time at the end of this particular workshop to answer more detailed questions if any of you individuals do have them. Okay. Setting up your tax rates and agencies. To add a sales tax item from the list menu, choose item list. Click on the item menu button and then check new. In the new type field, choose sales tax. In the tax name field, type in Bayshore. In the description field, type in Bayshore City. In the tax rate field, type in 1. In the agency field, type in Bayshore Tax Agency. Click on OK. click on, oh, excuse me, click on OK, click on Quick Add, and then click OK again. So basically what we've done here is gone in and established an item coding for the Bayshore Tax Agency. Once this is set up, we're going to go ahead and group single taxes together. So maybe I should stop for a moment and take you actually into the system and show you what this actually looks like. Okay. So as you can see in front of me, we currently have an invoice relating to Brian K. Cook. And as you can see on the screen, right, we have a number of different items relating to what we billed this specific individual for. One of the things you'll notice is on the far right-hand column, you will see the tax column that specifies non-taxable and taxable. Do remember, labor is not taxable, but anything physical is. So you will notice on the top line, we have removable labor, which is the labor associated with what was taking place at this specific job. But then underneath that, we have the physical items that were actually utilized in the install in this case. So we have things like lumber, windows, interior wood doors, exterior wood doors. Now, you'll notice that these items are all taxable, and they can be specified that way by dropping down the menu and specifying whether they're non-taxable or taxable items. Remember, labor is not taxable, anything physical is, unless you have a resale certificate. I will touch on resale certificates a little later on. Now, if you take a look at the bottom of this screen, you will see that we are dealing with San Domingo, sales tax for California County. Now, this particular item right here has already been set up by me in the item list. And that's exactly what we talked about in the last slide. So where can I see this to show that it has been set up correctly and ensure that I'm getting the correct tax rate? That goes back to our item list up here. So before, when we were in payrolls, we were in the chart of accounts looking at our payroll liabilities. Now in this case, we actually want to look at a specific item relating to a county that we are attempting to accrue our sales tax liability for. By clicking on the item list, you can bring up the full list here. As you can see, I've already gone ahead and entered in the lookup sound, which brings up the two counties that we're referencing here. Now, you could have San Luis Obispo County, you could have Santa Barbara County, you could have any of the counties that you are actually doing business in. This is just simply a new item that is used to accrue your sales tax liability under the $25,500 account. The great thing here is you can actually click on and give me the edit screen. So let's take a look at this. So in this case, we have San Domingo, which is California sales tax for San Domingo County. San Domingo County has a tax rate of 7.5%. And the system knows that this is then paid to the BOE, which stands for the State of Board and Equalization for California. At this point in time, the system is now accruing any sales that you are invoicing your customers for at a sales tax rate of 7.5%. At which point, at the end of each month, you will be able to go into your sales tax reporting and see the total accrual for that specific county and be able to make that sales tax payment to the Board of Equalization. Again, I will reiterate what I said at the beginning of this. Ignorance is not an excuse. If you do not have the correct county and or tax rate set up in here and you misreport, that liability falls on you. And there are penalties associated with it. So please take the time and the effort to ensure that you are setting these up correctly. Again, I'd also like to reiterate that you can clearly see on this screen that there is an item is inactive. If you are no longer working in a state, go ahead and make these codes inactive. Once again, do not delete. Please go ahead and make these items inactive. By making an item inactive, you retain all the relevant information relating to this specific item. The moment you delete the item from the system, you lose all that information. So, as again with payroll and as again with sales tax, please do not go ahead and delete things out of the system. So many people feel like they're cleaning the system up when all they are is really creating holes of information within QuickBooks that they then have to go back at a later date and re-enter within the system. Again, don't be afraid to make your items inactive. You can always reactivate them again at a later date. Okay, so before I jump back into the slide, I just want to stop for a moment and see if anyone has any questions regarding to this, as I tend to get some questions relating to the county accrual and how it is done. None. Well, oh, you gotta have this down by now. Okay. Moving on from this slide, we are fine. Okay, so let's talk about identifying and your most common taxes. So in your sales tax case, there's two worlds that we really live in. The sales tax that you have to accrue for because it's your responsibility, and the sales tax that you are charging to your customer that is then paying you that you have to report on. Please remember that if you are charging a customer sales tax, you have to pay sales tax. It's not an option for you to accrue a sales tax liability and then not make a payment on it. There are significant penalties associated with not paying sales tax that has been paid for by a customer. Again, please, I know that people think at times that the sales tax accruals can be paid at a later date. They can't. Your sales tax filings are dictated by the amount that you bring in, and you will have a sales tax schedule that will be dictated to you by the BOE. Again, not paying sales tax on sales tax that you have to charge your customer for can incur serious liabilities for your company. Again, don't make the mistake of not making that payment in due process. I'd also like to stop here and just talk about some of the add-ons that are available. Much like within payroll, when we talked about Intuit Payroll, there are a number of third-party tax systems out there. Now, in this case for QuickBooks Desktop, it does not utilize an automatic sales tax system. QuickBooks Online does. You do have to pay for it, and it is a rather robust system. Now, QuickBooks on Desktop itself does have a number of very good third-party systems that can be utilized to track and ensure that you have the correct sales tax rate relating to both city, county, and state. Some of the ones that I personally have worked with, and the one that's probably used most throughout the country, is a company called Avalara. Now, one of the nice features about Avalara is it is actually a third-party approved add-on by Intuit, which means Intuit have actually tested this product on most of, if not all of the system, and they rate this as one of the best customer supports for sales tax out there. One of the reasons that I am a big fan of Avalara is that one of the things that you agree to when you work with Avalara is they relieve you of the liability related to misreporting. What does that mean? Well, basically what it means is that they're so confident in the system that they use to do your tax reporting that they guarantee that the reporting and the information that is pulled out of your system is accurate. And if at any point the BOE, the IRS ever came back to question you, Avalara would actually handle that for you. It speaks to the quality of the product that they have. It's actually a very simple product that is added into the system and sits within your customer sales invoice. And basically what happens is when you set your customer up, Avalara goes ahead the moment you go to generate an invoice, and it references the zip code that is used for your customer and where you are invoicing them from to reach out to the local post office and reference that tax rates. Most people don't know this, but the BOE and the United States Postal Service are what work together to dictate what the tax rates are in certain areas. Avalara has the ability in real time to go out and get the tax rate for that specific area and ensure that you are accruing at the correct tax rate based on the area that you are living in. Now, examples of why this can be really key. In California, there are a number of different areas that may have specific requirements relating to sales tax, but it can get far more complicated out there when you're dealing with states like Colorado and Hawaii. As an example, Hawaii has a use tax that's associated. Another example would be Colorado, which has a number of special tax mandates related to schools. Now, if you would go in and look at a specific county within Colorado, it might dictate that your tax rate is a specific amount. Let's just say at 8%. But there might be special tax rates associated with those specific counties that might not be referenced there. It is on you to have the knowledge base to ensure that you have entered that correct tax rate. Avalara relieves you of that responsibility by automatically going out and ensuring that all reference tax rate for a specific city, county, or state are inputted in there, and it will do it every single time you generate a customer invoice. Again, if you have any questions regarding this, we can certainly talk about it at a later date or schedule an appointment to sit down with me. I do like to mention Avalara because it is a great tool that I use to resolve a lot of the tax issues that I had from a multi-state reporting process. It is also very reasonably priced and dictated on by each state that you do tax reporting in. With that said, let's talk about identifying your most common tax. So to set up a default sales tax, from the edit menu, choose preferences. Now we've already been into the preference menu already when we were looking at payroll. And once I get through these next couple of slides, I'm actually going to take you back in and show you the same process by which we use this. I will also show you where you can add in third-party companies that you might be working with to facilitate handling this for you. Please remember that as we walk through this, we are specifically talking about QuickBooks Desktop, not QuickBooks Online. Sure. Okay, we have a question from Tammy. Love the questions. Is the county tax rate based on the county where my business is established or the county where my client resides or works? Great question. So it honestly depends on if you're shipping it to first of all, what you're selling to the customer. Is it a service or a physical item, and where you're shipping it to? So that's where the system is going to reference the zip code and the tax rate associated with it. So understanding those two sides, that's why it's vital that you have your information set up correctly, referencing the zip code, and the customer information set up correctly so it can reference their zip code and ensure that you have that correct tax rate in there.
Thank you.
Great question. In the preference window, click on the sales tax icon in the left panel and then click on the company preferences. In the most common sales tax fields, make sure that the San Thomas is selected. And I'm using San Thomas not just as a general reference, specifically to a specific county. Click on OK. Indicating who and what gets taxed. So when I showed you the example of the invoice that I was referencing on the screen, and again, I like to use construction because the lines are really defined and really clear. Anything physical is taxable, anything labor related isn't. There are certain instances where that is not all the case, but that's just the general rule of thumb. And so not to create any confusion, we're going to stick with that for right now. To indicate a taxable item, in the item list, select doorknob studs under hardware. Click on the item menu button and then choose item list. Click on OK to close out the item and to close out the edit item window. It must be Friday because I can't speak. Close the item list. So again, this is where you take the time to go into your item list and ensure that the items that are set up in there are coded correctly. Anything physical is a taxable item that can be taxed on. The system in turn will know that and accrue for that. Anything that's related to labor is not. Again, taking the time to make sure that it's set up correctly will save you time down the line. Indicating who and what gets taxed. So this actually speaks to exactly what we were just talking about. To see an existing customer's record, click on the Customer Center on the navigation bar. In this case, we're going to select Jimenez Christina. We're going to click on the Edit Customer, click on the Additional Info tab. In the tax item fields, choose the Bayshore group. In our case, we would more than likely choose the BOE. Click on OK and close the customer out. So I'm going to actually pause for a moment here, go back into QuickBooks and take a look at those two items that we just spoke about. Okay, so let's go back in and take a look at our customer center correctly. Okay. So here's our specific customer that we've talked about. He's entered into the system correctly. One of the things I want to point out on this screen, or right away, I get this, that it comes up and it actually relates to the question that you asked a little earlier. You'll notice on this screen that the ship to address and the billable address might be different. Now, in this case, they're not, but it's not uncommon to see a scenario where the ship to address and the billable address are different. Remember, from your taxation standpoints and the accrual from the sales tax, you are only interested in where the product is going to, okay? An example of this would be, that's a good example of this. So we used to do a number of large constructions for Costco. So basically anytime Costco would build a new Costco, I worked for a solar company. They would call that solar company in and they would say, we're building a new Costco, we want to put a solar array on top. And every time they went to a different state and they constructed a new business, they would go ahead and call us in and we'd put it. Well, Costco is not located, headquarters-wide, is not located in all those different states. In fact, they're based back east, and we would have one central place that we would be billing to receive payment. But from an accrual process, where we physically sent the hardware and the construction equipment to actually put the solar panels on the roof of the Costco is where our tax rate is dictated to. Please be clear in understanding that it is not solely where you are billing to, but more so where you are physically sending a product and or item or what services you are providing to them. Again, key to make sure that this is set up correctly. Now, in my case, you might actually even have more than one ship to based on the size of the construction job, the location of the construction job. Please keep that in mind, and it's why when you look at this particular screen, you will notice that it has ship to one, which might reference the fact that you might have more than one location that you're shipping to, okay? Please keep that in mind because again, what is dictating this accrual rate right here is this zip code right here. Okay, no questions. Let's jump back into our slideshow. Good. Okay. So again, indicating who and what gets taxed. We briefly touched on the fact that labor, non-taxable, anything that says physical item is taxable. Okay. Applying tax to each sale. So the process of generating an invoice within the system is the process by which the system will accrue taxes based on the county, the state, and the city. To apply tax to a sale, on the home page, click on Create an Invoice. In the Customer Job field, choose him and his utility shed. Select both customer and job. So let's just pause there for 1 second and just talk about what that means between customer and a job. So a customer is the person that will be paying you for the work that is being done. The job tends to be the location where the work is taking place. Okay, and that's what we talked about on that previous screen that I showed you within QuickBooks. The billable would be the customer, but the ship to would be the job, and these are different. Understanding the relationship and the difference between the two is key. In the template field, select the custom invoice from the drop-down list. Click in the item column and select doorknob stands. So again, we're talking about the physical item here, piece of hardware. In the quantity column, type 4 and then press tab and click to save. So now basically we've entered an invoice for this specific customer and we've told it that there were 4 doorknobs. This, in this case, would be a taxable event because this is a physical item that you are then going to mail or send out to the specific job site. Click Save and Close. Okay. Determining what you owe. So throughout this process that you accrue every time you generate an invoice, the system will create a sales tax liability report under your vendors and payable. Now, in this case, you've gone ahead and set up the BOE within your system, and the system knows that that tax accrual that you've created will be paid to the BOE on the 10th of the following month. This will be dictated by your tax pay schedule that you have established. From the reports and menus, choose the vendors and payables and then choose sales tax liability. In the date field, choose this month's date. So again, depending on the frequency with which you pay your sales tax, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annually, you would specify the period for what you are reporting. In the date field, choose this month's date, close the sales tax liability report. If QuickBooks asks you if you want to memorize the report, click no. That last one right there, I would actually click on yes. So I would always go back in on a monthly basis and review the sales tax liability before the 10th of the following month to ensure that I had a clear understanding of what my sales tax liability was. Remember, we are all human, which means we all make mistakes. It only takes 1 decimal point to throw that sales tax liability off by a very big number. And this involves a lot of time and effort if you've closed out a prior period to go ahead and get this set up. This is one of the reasons that I very much recommend within QuickBooks that once you have closed out a period that you lock it out to prevent any other interaction from a other period interfering. Once a period is closed out within QuickBooks, you do not have the ability to go back unless that period is unlocked. It is a very effective preventive measure to stop information being pushed back into the wrong periods and throwing your balances out. An example of this is receiving an invoice 2 months late and then trying to go back and enter it in the period that it was for. It is far better to go ahead and invoice it in or enter it as a vendor/customer in the period that you are currently in. Please keep this in mind. This is one of the more common mistakes that I do see within QuickBooks when it relates to entering both bills and or invoicing customers. With that said, let's go ahead and look. Oh, we do have a question. If you're not using a third-party service, would you recommend Google searching the tax rate for the ship to zip code for customers and inputting it when you set? Absolutely. And that's the correct question and the correct answer. With that said, I wouldn't rely on Google. I love Google. But the gospel is the BOE, the Board of Equalization. Their website, you can go to it. The second tab over, actually, and I can show you guys if you wish, the second tab over has all the tax rate. They are consistently updated. And not only will it give you the problem, the only time with Google that I kind of have an issue sometimes is that you actually want to see that complete breakout. So not only do you traditionally just want to see what the total tax rate is, you really want to see from a state, county, and city level breakout so that you can have a clear understanding. Okay, not to get too complicated with you, but if you are operating outside the boundaries of the city, for an example, so a great example of that would be in SLO here, a local airport. So most people don't know, but that is actually outside the bounds of the city perimeter. And so if you're doing business out there, you actually don't have to pay the city tax. So again, having the clear understanding of what the tax rate liability is for the area that you're living in and making sure that it's set up correctly. The tools that I would definitely use would be the BOE. And again, the company that I referenced earlier called Avalara, their resources in ensuring the correct and most accurate up-to-date sales tax rates is key to this. With that said, again, I'm sure Google does a good enough job. I've just never really used it to ensure that they are accurately tracking those sales tax rates. Again, I'll iterate what I've said to you before. Ignorance is no excuse when it comes to paying taxes. Great question. Okay. I think at this point in time, I'm actually going to bounce back into QuickBooks so we can just take a quick look at that vendors payable and the sales tax liability report that's associated with it. Okay, back into QuickBooks. So as you can see, I jumped right into reports. I jumped down to my vendors and payables, and I jumped right to the bottom here and looked at my sales tax liability. Much like what we talked about when we're walking through the slideshow at the top here, I've referenced last month. If you have a specific period of time that you wish to reference, you can certainly reference it up here. Again, please don't pay attention to my date. I like to live in the future, as I tell myself. With that said, you can clearly see what the sales tax liability that's associated with this period. And more importantly, the counties and the breakout. One of the things you'll find is that when you go into the BOE to do your filings, if you're doing them manually, is they physically want to see what is being paid to each county. That's why it's imperative that we set the item list up correctly with all the relevant counties that we are operating within or shipping specific products to. So in this case, we have San Domingo and San Thomas on here, and those are going to be paid out to the state of to the BOE, which is the Board of Equalization. So in this particular case, over this particular period of time in November, we had a sales tax liability of $1,629.27. Again, if this is set up correctly, and if you're ensuring that you have the correct sales tax rates in there, QuickBooks does a phenomenal job of tracking and breaking it out. The key to this, though, is ensuring that those are set up at the beginning, not at the end. One of the recommendations that I have in this case is that when you are dealing with a customer and or job, just like you walk through the process of setting a job up in QuickBooks and a customer within QuickBooks, that the moment you notice that you are operating in a different state and or a different county, you go back and ensure, number one, that it's set up in QuickBooks. Number two, you ensure that you are registered with the state that you are operating in. So what's an example of that, and why do I reference that? Well, let's say I'm shipping something to Las Vegas. I need to be registered in Nevada as well if I am shipping items out of state to file on that side, whether it be sales tax or use tax. Another example of that would be Hawaii. If I am shipping a product from California to Hawaii, I need to be registered in Hawaii as well. Please keep this in mind, because it's not just a matter of accruing and tracking in California, but if you are doing businesses outside California, there are tax liabilities and reporting requirements that are dictated by the state, county, and city that you're in. It's important that you do your due diligence before you go ahead and set up businesses in those counties, in those specific states as well, as each state may have a different tax liability and or reporting schedule that you might not be used to, having been based in California. That responsibility resides with you. I can't tell you how many times when we're looking at a prospective new construction job that is outside that we need to take these things into account. Again, each state is different. Its tax liability rate and the accrual rate and the frequency is different. You also need to be registered in those states if you are doing business. Please keep that in mind. With that said, you have your sales tax liability report in front of you for the past month. You're simply going to log into the BOE for the prior period, enter the breakout that's in here, and submit your payment directly to the BOE. When done right, it is very simple and very effective within QuickBooks. Let's jump back into the last of our slides. Good. Determine what you owe. Well, I basically just walked you through the actual process of figuring out how much and who you would be paying taxes to. So in this case, we had looked at two specific counties that we had accrued for over the month of December. We went into our vendors and payables and then chose the sales tax revenue summary screen. We opened it up. It gave us the total that we needed to. This breakout would enable us to log on to the BOE, enter the breakout in there, and submit our payment. We would then go back and enter that same liability within the system. So the system is then tracking it. At this point in time, you would then have the BOE set up as a vendor in your system so that you would enter the tax liability and then pay it out. Thus, the system would then track it from you moving forward. Determining what you owe. To see the sales tax payable register from the chart of account, from the company menu, choose the chart of account. Click on the sales tax payable. Once you select it, click on the activities menu button and select the use register. Close the register and close the chart of accounts. So I'm showing you this because this is another method for you to go ahead and view the accrual that has taken place. Here's what I would say. Try not to go into the register itself. It is, unless you're very comfortable with working inside the register, it is very easy to get confused, and it is very easy to make a modification in there without realizing it. I recommend that if you're not entirely sure what you're doing with the register, that you use the reporting feature and look at the sales tax accrual. Again, if you've worked in the register before, and we do offer a class that goes over this, that is okay. But again, in most trainings that QuickBooks has, they reference this because it gives you the ability to go in and actually look at the granular breakout. And what I reference by that is the county, the state, the city, if you wish to. Again, unless there's a specific reason, I would not recommend that you do this. Once again, if you've used the register in the past and feel comfortable going in there and utilizing it, certainly do. I use the reporting feature because it's more concise, more condensed, and it gives me all the relevant information that I need. Paying your tax agency, the last slide of the day. To make sales tax payment, on the home page, click on Manage Sales Tax. In the Manage Sales Tax window, click on Pay Sales Tax button. Select To Be Printed checkbox. In the Show Sales Tax Due Through, you specify the period and the type, and then press the tab. Click on Pay All Taxes button, click on OK, close out the Managing Sales Tax. So this is not the only way that you can go about processing the sales tax out. Like I referenced a little earlier, you could have set the vendor up as the BOE as well. Thus, when you're on the BOE's website, they will actually reference your checking account and pull the sales tax liability directly from it, thus preventing you from actually having to cut a physical check. That way, when you go into the BOE under the customer, you can have the bill, the sales tax liability, in there already. And since you've processed that payment through the BOE directly to your checking, you can process it and pay it directly out of there and mark it paid. This is the process by which I used to do most of my sales tax. It's the simplest and most effective way for you to track, pay, and stay on top of your sales tax liability. And with that, we get to the end of our very first SBDC sales tax workshop. Thank you very much to everyone that attended. Please give us your feedback in regards to this, whether you want more specific detail and more interaction in regards to these workshops. Please also do realize that this class I have actually never done virtually. Only because of this topic at hand, I tend to find that I like smaller groups of 5 to 10 people in person that we can spend specific time going into specific items. This is a very broad subject base, and at times it can get confusing. And having the ability to sit down with individuals. With that said, given what we've been going through with COVID, we did want to offer this out. Hopefully it was helpful to everybody. We will be doing more classes in regards to this. I also like to remind everyone that the SBDC has other consultants relating to both QuickBooks, sales tax, and finances that are here to both support and help our local community. We will be offering additional classes for both QuickBooks and sales tax related items. But again, your feedback in this area is key to us being able to streamline and make this particular workshop more effective. If there are any specific things that I did not touch on that you feel I should have, please let us know. And more importantly, give us your feedback on if this was informative to you and or we can improve it in any way. Again, this is our first attempt at doing this virtually. And considering what we're going through, it was the only option that we have. It's not something we traditionally do virtually, again, because of the topic at hand. Thank you very much to everyone for attending. If there's any questions or comments in the meantime, I will stay on the line for the next 15 to 20 minutes to see if anyone has any questions. Again, a reminder, the SBDC is here to support our local community. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can be of assistance to you. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening.